Hi, everyone. My name is Jay Vergara, and this is leadhuman.ai. So, in the last video, I showed you what's actually under the hood when people talk about AI agents. Today, we're actually going to be building one. And I actually don't mean like asking a chatbot a really good question or anything of that sort. I mean actually building something that reads a live database and it actually evaluates every entry against a real regulatory framework, like in real life, like in real work. And it actually produces an actual audit report with, things like article citations and like severity levels, a full report essentially. So by the end of this video, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to build a skills file. You're going to be able to know how connectors work and how to build an actual agent that does real work for you. So let's get right into it. Okay, so for today, I picked compliance for this tutorial. And I know that sounds really boring, but that's actually the point. Compliance, as you know, if you're working in corporate, compliance is one of those things where there's a lot of regulation and you have like databases full of systems that need to be checked against it. And someone has to actually go through every single entry and really verify that it meets the actual requirements. And that's kind of exactly the kind of work where an agent makes sense because it's thorough, it's repetitive, and it really needs to be done the same way every time. So today, what we're going to do is in JSpeak, we're going to be building a counselor, but really what it is an AI agent that audits AI systems against something in real life, the EU AI Act. Okay, so here's the workspace that, like it's simulated, obviously, right? But here's a workspace that a simulated compliance team has been working out of, right? So there's a tracker with, like 10 AI systems. Each one has a risk level. We have transparency status, human oversight, data documentation, all of that. So I want you to imagine that this is actually like a living project file that is being used by a real team. And if I actually click into one, a real one, like this vendor risk assessment talent screen AI, you can see the use case, right? So there's notes when it was last revisited, and all of that fun stuff that you'd see in an actual project folder with real life people working on it. And there's a lot of support pages too, reports, meeting notes, all of that jazz. People really leaving actual comments here. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to really simulate a real workspace here because we want, like a real agent to work with messy, actual lived in data like this, right? Okay, so before we build this, I really want to explain what we're actually making because this is where it gets really interesting and this is where it becomes really useful for you. In Claude's Cowork mode, you can create something called a skill file. Now, a skill file is basically just a set of instructions that tell Claude how to think about a specific topic, right? So before, like you'd have to do this in code and all of that engineer jazz, but these days with agentic AI, you just talk to it in natural language, right? So instead of actually explaining what you want every single time you open like a new chat, you actually write it just once in a skills file, and Claude loads it up automatically whenever that topic comes up, right? And the reason that this matters is that it really turns essentially what before was a chatbot into an agent, right? So the skills file gives it expertise, it gives it a framework, it gives it like specific checks to run and a format to actually report in. So let me actually show you what one looks like. So I'm here in Claude under Cowork, right? I'm just going to zoom in here for you. I'm in Cowork, and if you click on Customize and you click on Skills, you can see a list of skills that I have over here. And I'm going to go back to the cross-culture counselor. This is what I showed to you previously before, right? And essentially, as you can see, it's all in natural language here, but it's basically what we call a markdown document. And at the top, you have the name, cross-culture counselor, and a description basically that tells Claude when to activate it, right? So there's a role definition. This one says, like it's my cross-culture counselor. You've got the actual frameworks. There's specific checks and that the agent runs on the on entry, right? Like what kind of things that it does and all of that fun stuff. And this is really like all of this stuff again, and I explained this in the previous video, but this information along with the reference documents that it has here, this is what it gives its expertise, right? Without this file, basically it's just a chatbot. With all of these files, it's something really, really powerful. So just like I said in the last video that I showed you and what I showed you right now, a skills file gives Claude the knowledge, but the connector is what it actually gives it access, right? So a connector is basically a bridge between Claude and an external tool like databases like Notion or things like Google Drive or even Slack or whatever it is that you folks are using at your organization. So when I say agent reads the Notion database, it's not actually doing something magical, right? Basically, there's a Notion connector that lets Claude search, read, and even write to your workspace. And the reason why I'm explaining this to you is because this is the pattern. The skills file gives Claude the knowledge, but the connector is what gives it access. So a connector is basically a bridge between Claude and an external tool like Notion or Google Drive or Slack or whatever it is that your organization is using. So when I say the agent reads the Notion database, it's not doing anything magical really. What it's doing is there's a Notion connector that lets Claude search, read, and even write to that workspace. The reason I'm explaining this to you is because that really is the pattern. The skills file plus the connector equals an agent. It knows things and can actually do things. So we're back in Claude here, and let me show you what the connector actually looks like. It's already up here, so I'm going to click on connector. So again, if you're on Claude, you can just have a look at, I'm in Cowork here, and then I click on customize, and then I click on connectors, right? And you can see all of the connectors that I actually have here, and it's pretty self-explanatory, right? But you can see that I have something called an Apify MCP server that's super useful. I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But some of the stuff that I have here is things like Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Drive, Notion, which is again my databases. But the ones that we're going to be looking at, the one that we're going to be looking at today is Notion. Right? So it can actually go into Notion and it'll actually read the documents, read the database and the documents and all that work file that I showed you previously before, right? So when the agent runs its audit, for example, when we create that skills file with that agent, it'll actually connect to Notion and it'll actually edit what's going on through this connector. So it's like a bridge, right? And it pulls every entry from Notion and it evaluates them according to its skills file. So before we actually build the agent, I put together a few reference PDFs covering the EU AI Act. So there's things like risk classification, deployer obligations, compliance timeline, penalties, and all of that fun stuff. And what it does is actually it gives that agent a foundation. But I don't want to just hand it everything because that's basically, again, just that's a chatbot. So the prompt that I'm going to give it actually also tells it to go online and research additional information, additional specific information about things like article requirements on its own, right? And that really is the distinction, right? I'm not just giving it PDFs. One works with what you give it, but a real agent can actually go out there and find out what it actually needs. Okay, cool. So I'm actually showing you here those 3 reference documents that I'm talking about, right? It talks about all of that fun, exciting stuff about the EU AI Act. Really important stuff, things like risk tiers, Annex 3 categories, the key articles, all important stuff. The agent actually will start from this as a foundation, and then it's going to go deeper on its own. But again, we are going to be feeding this to the agent so that it has a base understanding of what the EU AI Act is. Okay, so I've got the prompt ready here. I'm not going to bore you with the details with me writing it out manually. So if you need to pause the screen and have a read at what I have, please do so now. But basically, the prompt here tells Claude exactly what I want to build. And it's going to read those PDF files that I showed you previously before. I'm going to just drag it in here, and I'm going to do that right now. There you go. And it's going to go online as well too and research the actual regulation text and then write the entire skills file itself from scratch. So again, if you want to have a quick look at my prompt about what I'm doing with on how to actually create this agent, you can pause here and check it out. But as you can see, it's all natural language. And if you're not able to actually write it out yourself, right? Ask Claude to help you. Right? Ask Claude to actually go in and in natural language, tell it what it is that you want. All right. So I'm gonna press let's go and let's see what it does. All right. So I pasted in the prompt with the PDFs, and as you can see, it's actually thinking right now, and that all the 3 PDFs are absorbed. Now it's researching the specific articles online and checking my Notion database at the same time, right? So again, it's connected via that bridge that we talked about when I showed you the connectors before. And as you can see here as well too, right? It's actually telling you what the progress is, right? So it's telling you the research, it's researching the EU AI Act, it's checking the articles for that, right? It's checking the actual Notion database, and then it's building that skills.md file, and then it's creating the EU AI Act compliance counselor. It really is just an agent, and we're going to be able to save that skill to a workspace and verify its output. So I'm going to let it cook here for a little bit, and then I'll show you when it's done. Okay, so it looks like it's finished. So let's check out what it actually built. Now, looking into Claude here, it says that it gives you a quick overview of what's actually inside the skills file. It gives you the logic, the classification logic that we actually fed into it. It actually goes into the articles as well, but more so, we can actually have a look at the actual file. We can look at the skills MD file here. So it has all of the information. It says that it produces an audit report. It has all the information about the EU AI Act here and its obligations. And basically, it has all of that information that we fed into it previously before, right? So which is great. Now that you have the file, it actually looks like what ended up happening is it created the MD file, but it didn't. You couldn't actually click in and install it. So what I did ask it up to do is to package it up as a skills file, so I could click and install. Now, there's 2 ways that you could actually go about doing this. It either creates just a skills file, or since I mentioned install, what it actually did was it created a plugin. So the difference between a skills.md file and a plugin is that for a skills.md file, it's just something that you can have for yourself, right? So if it's just for yourself, install it just as a skills.md file. But as a plugin, what you can actually do is you can actually go and share it with your team or your coworkers, and it's just a one-click install for the plugin. So in this case, we just saved it as a plugin, and you can click on here on Save Plugin, and it'll actually just install on your computer. And if you share it with a coworker or a teammate, they can just one-click install it onto their computer as well too. But more importantly, let's actually check if it was actually installed onto our computer. So I'm going to click on Customize here under Cowork. And you can see that under personal plugins, there it is, right? So it's an audit. It audits your AI systems in Notion because it knows that's the database that I'm using specifically for this. And you can click on here, and yeah, there you go. There's just a skills.md file under the plugin, right? So it has all of that information in it. And you know what would be cool? Let's actually see it work in person. And just a quick reminder here that we do have a simulated project file that we created on Notion, right? All right, so let's have a look. Load the EU AI Act plugin and audit my project database in Notion. So, it should know what Notion database I'm talking about. So let's have a look. And as you can see here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger here, on the right-hand side, it's actually loading that EU AI Act counselor, right? It's loading the tools. And let's see if it goes. And while it's going through this, I'm just going to remind you again that it's connected through Notion through that connector bridge that we previously talked about. And there you go. You can see on the right-hand side on my screen here that it actually has Notion being connected, and it's starting to go through that process, right? So the skills file itself, oh, you might not be able to see it because my face is blocking it, but the skills file itself is connected, and it's connected itself with the database, right? And as you can see, it's starting to go through that process. So while it's thinking, it's probably going to take a minute here. So let's have a look at when it's done. Okay, so let's actually have a look at what it found here because it just finished. And as you can see, it's got quite an extensive report here. It has critical findings so what basically is the problem, what the regulation requires, and what a suggested solution for it is. You have things that you need to resolve before August 2nd, which is the actual, so the agent actually knows that the deadline for the EU AI Act is August 2nd for 2026. It shows you the stuff that did actually pass as well too. It shows you a summary as well as a reference section over here. So pretty cool stuff. You have a whole bunch of information here that would otherwise take a normal human being a whole bunch of time to double check. And I'm not saying that we should just completely trust the agent as well. You need to have that human in the middle, which is essentially what the EU AI Act actually does stipulate, that you need to have humans in the middle here. But it's a really good system for you to start, and it really optimizes your workflow. So think about what we did just now, right? We gave Claude a skills.md file that teaches it the EU AI Act of Compliance, and we also connected it to a Notion database through a connector. And now it audits every entry against basically the actual regulation every time we run it. So it's the same thoroughness, it's the same criteria, it has the same depth every single time we do it. And that really is the difference between having a chatbot and an agent. A chatbot gives you an answer once, and then you're really steering the entire thing from scratch next time. An agent in this case has that expertise already baked in. And really, when you think about it, this is the point where it gets really interesting, because this is just a starting point. You just created that agent, right? You can do so many things with this now with the automations that we have with AI and agents right now. So you could schedule this to run every morning. So it reads that database. So you know how like people when they're working on the project, every Monday morning we'll see if we're compliant. So it reads that database and it does the check every week. And it sends you that report even before your work week starts. Or you could have it dispatch findings to Slack, right? So that the compliance team gets notified every time there's something that goes from at risk to critical, right? Or you could even trigger it remotely from your phone with Claude's new updates with dispatch these days. So you're running compliance audits from the train on your way to work. And that pattern is the same every time. Skills file plus connector. It basically, and you pull a trigger, right? So if you want to see me actually build the scheduling part and those automated reports, just drop a comment down here in the comment section, because that's what I'm thinking of building for the next video, going through the automations and what you can actually do with an AI agent like this. And that's it, folks. Lead humanly, learn constantly, build with AI. Again, my name is Jay Vergara for leadhuman.ai, and check out our website. Do all of the YouTube things, like, subscribe, or just reach out on LinkedIn and say hi. And that's it. Thanks and take care.